Okay, so we're now cooking risotto. So we start off with a nice hot pan. This is the same pan we've used to cook the vegetables, and we add a little bit more oil and a bit of butter. Now, how much is a bit is entirely up to you. We normally say it's about a tablespoon per person of oil, and same thing for butter. So we just need to melt the butter. We don't want it to brown because otherwise it will turn bitter and you will taste that in your risotto. So the pan is quite hot, so that's why I'm lifting it. At this point we need to add our shallot. Some people, the shallot I've used is 1 shallot for quite a bit of rice. This is debatable. I mean, some people prefer a stronger flavour of onion or shallots, but I like to taste the flavour of rice because this is a very fragrant rice, and also the taste of the vegetables. So I'm going slowly and easy on onion and shallot, but it's up to you. If you like it, you can go for it. Add a little bit more. Right. I'm now ready to add rice. We say in Italy is 1 fistful, 1 handful per person. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That is about 100 grams each. Okay. So we're now toasting the rice, as we say. Make sure all the grain of rice is nicely coated in the oil. Okay, and now we're ready. This sound, the sound of wine hitting the pan is just fantastic. There's a nice saying that Venetians say. They say rice is born in water and dies in wine. I can't think of a better death myself. Okay, so what we're doing now, we're letting the wine evaporate. This is very important because otherwise you will taste the acidity afterwards. I can still smell the wine, so I'm letting it cook off a little longer. But what I can show you here are these starch legs, as we call them. It's important because you know that you're toasting it correctly and the starch is starting to come out. So when we're cooking risotto, it's essential that we get the starch out of the rice. Okay, now, yeah, the wine is probably all cooked off, the alcohol is burned off. I'm ready to add my stock. Okay, bit by bit. Now let me tell you a couple of things about the stock. Stock is a key ingredient in making risotto. Effectively, this is what your rice is drinking. So if the stock is tasteless, your rice will be tasteless at the end. No matter what you do, your rice will be quite tasteless. Which is why we've added real vegetables to it, and then we've added salt at the end. You need to put a little bit more salt than you would normally put in food, just because the rice absorbs it, and if you don't do that, your risotto at the end will be quite tasteless. But the key thing about the stock is not only that it's going to taste really, really nice, but also needs to be boiling, as you can see. The problem is when you add cold stocks, your rice goes a bit crazy because you adding heat from the pan, then you add in cold stock, so it stops cooking, and then by the time it picks up the heat again, it takes time, which is why it takes 45 minutes. If you use boiling stock all the way through, 18 minutes and it's done. Okay, so all the starch is coming out. You can see the starch in the pan, and you need to constantly stir it, otherwise it will stick to the pan, and then you will end up with an horrible mess. So that's quite important that you stir all the time. Now, utensils to use when cooking risotto. You can see I'm using a girariso. This is a proper gadget with a hole. I love this stuff because basically what happens, the rice goes in and out the hole and helps the starch coming out. Then you definitely don't want a metal spoon to stir risotto, because the rice is quite delicate, and if you metal against metal, it will just break the grain. So it's important that you're quite gentle and you use a wooden spoon. Okay. In terms of the pan, I'm using this flat pan because it's easier to then show what you're doing. But ideally you would want a pan that's slightly higher, because the heat is then contained better and it's going to be quicker to cook the risotto. You can use anything in your risotto as long as you don't mix too many flavors. Like in anything, I guess you don't want a pasta with too many ingredients and too many flavors. Same thing, you don't want a risotto with too many flavors in it, otherwise you don't actually be able to taste anything. And every time you make a risotto, your stock should mirror your main ingredients in the risotto. So in this case we have a simple vegetable stock. If I was making, I don't know, a chicken and asparagus, then I would probably have a chicken stock with a few bits of asparagus in it. So you always match your stock with whatever the ingredients there. But I would go for fresh stock if you have the time, but fresh is best. Now, what kind of rice do you use to make risotto? Okay, I'm not just saying this because I'm Italian and I want to promote Italian rice, but I've tried to make risotto with paella rice, with basmati rice. I'm one of these cooks that when I need to cook, whatever I've got in the cupboard I use, and I try and experiment. But I can assure you that none of the rice works apart from Italian rice. We have the king and the queen, if you want, of Italian rices. The king, I think, is Vialone Nano, and then you've got the queen, which is Carnaroli. They're both really, really good to make risotto. Vialone Nano is kind of a thicker grain, contains quite a lot of starch, giving you a really nice, creamy, lush risotto at the end. And Carnaroli has got a slightly longer grain, more elegant grain. It's very good to make risotto, for example, if you're making a Prosecco risotto or champagne risotto or wine risotto, which gives you a nice, elegant dish at the end. They're both very, very good, but contain slightly less starch, therefore it retains his bite a little bit more. So they're both very good. It depends on your taste, really, what you prefer. But I wouldn't go with anything else rather than these two. Some people will say, oh, what about arborio? Yeah, you can use it. It's not quite there. I would say if Carnaroli and Vialone Nano are, I don't know, the Rolls Royce and the Bentleys of the rice, arborio is probably the Cinquecento of the rice. So you probably won't go there. Okay, so we're now towards the very end of our risotto. Our risotto is basically cooked. All we need to do is to add our vegetables in. Give it a final stir just to warm the vegetable through. We don't need any extra cooking because it's already cooked. And all the starch is there, so we know it's going to be nice and creamy. And I tell you, to add extra creaminess, you just switch off the gas and you add an extra ladle towards the end, and you just stir, and all the creamy starch comes out. So we call this mantecatura, this last stage, where we add butter, well, not enough, and a generous amount of cheese, depending on your taste. We finish it off over here. We really whip this up. We move the pan, we shake the pan. So we let the cheese melt and the butter melt, and all the final bits of starch comes out. We add a slightly more stock. I like my risotto to be nice and creamy. Venetian call it all'onda, which means it has a wave. So when you put it in a plate, it goes back. Nice and soft. You see how it's changing color because it's becoming really creamy. At this stage, I check, I'm happy. A little salt, yeah. So we're going to finish this off with a touch of pesto. There we go. Don't add too much because otherwise it will be a bit overpowering. Okay. We're ready to plate up. You see, alonda nice and soft. A few pine kernels. A few more drops of pesto. Yum, risotto primavera.